Okay, so not so long ago I did a recommendations video for you guys. I've done one with fantasy and I also did one with LGBTIQ plus books where I took the time to recommend some books to you guys, including my Mr. Francy tier levels. And today I'm going to continue to do that with classic books. So a lot of you guys have actually asked me if I could do this for classics. I'm more than happy to oblige. We have 4 tier levels. Tier 1, in the way that I do it, is an entry point. If you've never read classics before, here's a great place to start. Tier 2 is your next level up. Okay, you've read some classics, you'd like to go a little bit further. Not too much, just a little bit of a higher level. That's your Tier 2. Tier 3, we go up a little bit higher again. And Tier 4 is advanced. Don't jump in and start with these because these are going to be tough ones for you to read. Before I get into showing you the books, I just want to discuss something that has come up with you guys a couple of times here and there, and I just want to make a point about it. Anytime that I talk about a classic book that I've read, whether I'm talking about it in a monthly TBR, a monthly wrap, or doing a review of that book, I always put the age range for my classic books as adult. And you guys are starting to wonder why, and that's completely understandable because some of the classics that I read were originally published as middle grade or even YA classic books. So I'm just going to take a very quick moment to explain that to you. In as succinct a point as I can make it, the reason why I categorize with age rating all of the classic books that I read as adult books is all to do with the writing style. Classic books, by definition, are books that were written a long time ago that still hold and stand to the test of time today. Because these books were written such a long time ago, they're written with a writing style that most modern readers would not be used to. Modern books are written very differently, and most of the time, especially with middle grade and YA, modern books are written with a very simplistic, modern day writing style, which is very different to what you would get in a classic book. Because of this, it makes the writing style with classics a lot harder to read. Because of that, on my channel, I want to reflect classic books as being adult books to warn any potential reader of a classic going in, you're going to come into a really tough writing style to read, so just be ready for that. But that's why I do it for me. It comes back to the writing style. But enough of that housekeeping. Let's get right into the tiers because I know you want to know where these books lie so that you can have these recommendations for yourselves to start getting into classics. And if you do start getting into classics thanks to this video, let me know in the comment section below. So, Tier 1 is entry level. And the 2 books that I'm going to recommend to you are actually books 1 and 2 in a classic series. Now, for those who don't age range their classics like I do, they'd probably call this a middle grade classic series. But of course, you know me, adult classics, I would just more look at them as an entry level to classics. And so the books I'm going to recommend to you are Winnie the Pooh and The House at Pooh Corner. Both of these books are written by A.A. Milne. So if you have seen any of the visual adaptations of Winnie the Pooh, whether it be the films, the shows where for some reason they need to make Winnie the Pooh 3D, then you have a rough idea of what's going on here. But basically, for those of you who don't know, the basic premise of the Winnie the Pooh stories is that we have a boy whose name is Christopher Robin. Christopher Robin has a bunch of toy animals, and these books are based on what the toy animals go through from where they live, which is a wooded area called the 100 Acre Woods. So book 1 is a compendium of short stories about Winnie the Pooh, and then book 2 continues on with more short stories about Winnie the Pooh. And the writing style is really easy to read. So that's why I'm recommending these as your entry point, because they are easy to read. They are children's stories as well, so not only for the writing style but also for the plot itself. It's just, they're easy reads all round, but they're also fun and they're quite enjoyable. So this is where I recommend you start. These are my Tier 1 books. Alright, Mr. Francy, I've read some middle grade like that. I want something a little bit higher. I don't want it to be too advanced for me in themes or in writing style, but I want to be a little more advanced than Winnie the Pooh. Don't worry, I've got you covered. My tier 2 books are The Little Mermaid and Other Fairy Tales by Hans Christian Andersen, The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett, and The Wizard of Oz by Frank L. Baum. The reason why these three come up as a tier 2 for me is because the themes of the book are seen as, young adults / middle grade, although we'll talk about The Little Mermaid in just a moment, but the majority overall, it seems middle grade or on the younger side of young adult, but the writing style is tougher to read than the Winnie the Pooh books, and yet still some of the easiest writing styles to read, which is why they are tier 2. This is a compendium of short stories that Hans Christian Andersen wrote. Please know that while the writing style of this book is easy, what sets this book apart from the other two are the themes. Hans Christian Andersen is not afraid to leave consequences on the table that could be tough for children to read these days. I'm guessing children read these back in the day. And The Little Mermaid, which is the feature title on the book, as I say, there are many short stories in here, it's just Little Mermaid's the feature title, was adapted into a Disney film that is very nice, sweet, cuddly and fluffy compared to what Hans Christian Andersen originally did. The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. This is a really beautiful story. The basic premise of this book is that we're following a girl by the name of Mary Lennox, who was born and raised in India under the guise of her servants because her mother and father didn't have time for her. At some point during Mary's childhood, both of her parents die of cholera, so she is shipped off to the UK, to England to be specific, to live at Misselthwaite Manor with her uncle, Mr. Craven, who she is informed by Mrs. Medlock, the housekeeper who picks her up, will have no time for her because he has no time for anyone else, so she'll just have to look after herself. Mary comes to find out that there is a secret garden somewhere in the grounds that Mr. Craven locked up 10 years ago when his wife dies. She becomes plagued with these thoughts and obsessed with the garden and trying to find it. It is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful story to read. And if you are coming out of some kind of a darkness with books that you've been reading, whether they be gothic books, thrillers, horrors, or even darker fantasy, this is a great way to refresh things. And for the sake of how beautiful the book is and sweet and nice, that's why I put it as tier 2. And the writing style is really easy to read as well. There's a little bit of Yorkshire in here, so do be mindful of that, but you can ascertain what's being said by everything else that's being written around it. So The Wizard of Oz by Frank L. Baum, so you probably know the classic film with Judy Garland, right? And you probably think that that's stuck pretty close to the book, the novel, the original canonical work, right? Unfortunately, you would be wrong. While the film does cover a decent amount of the book, because of the creative liberties taken by whoever the creative liberties were taken with the film to add in songs, the film is a musical adaptation. The book has no songs in it at all. And because of that, there is so much more that goes on in the books that we miss because they are taken out for the sake of putting in songs. So please know that you are still getting the lovely film that you potentially grew up watching, but you're getting a whole lot more with this book. You want something more advanced. You understand and appreciate that The Little Mermaid, The Secret Garden, and The Wizard of Oz are more advanced in plotline than Winnie the Pooh, but you're thinking, Mr. Francy, I want something more adult in theme. I've got you covered as well. Welcome to my tier 3 books. And we're going to start with Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. And then I'm going to talk to you about The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. So let's talk about the Rebecca, not just Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. The premise of this book is that we're following an unnamed character. Daphne du Maurier made a very interesting decision to never actually give us the first name of this character. And this character ends up being known eventually just as Mrs. De Winter. And I'll explain why. The premise of this book is that we follow this unnamed character who is being treated rather horribly by a woman. One day the boss lady ends up getting sick, so she becomes bedridden at the hotel that they're staying in, and when the unnamed character goes downstairs, she meets a man by the name of Mr. De Winter, and they end up falling in love with each other. He is significantly older than her, and it doesn't take long for her to be whisked away by him. They get married and they move in together to Manderley, where Mr. De Winter lives. Don't worry, I'm not giving you spoilers because all of this happens within the first couple of chapters. The rest of the book is a gothic toned classic look at what's going on at the mansion Manderley where Mr. De Winter lives, what was going on with his wife Rebecca, and everything that has transpired since then. It is a very interesting book, but definitely has adult themes in it, and also the writing style is tougher to read because it's quite old. In fact, this edition of Rebecca that I have is the 80th edition. Moving on then to The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Okay, there was a controversy that occurred when this book was originally published because back in those days things were very, very different, and there are some very slight LGBTIQ plus themes that are explored in this book. Now, when I say slight, I mean so slight that if you blink, you probably will miss them. But they are there, and they are there enough that Oscar Wilde, the author, actually ended up going on trial for this book because of suspicions surrounding him because of the slight LGBTIQ plus themes in this book. He actually also, owing to that case, ended up being found guilty and served jail time for what he wrote in this book. You can hear me getting passionate about it because in my day, that would not happen. But I do appreciate what Oscar Wilde went through in order for this book to not only be published, but also to pave the way for amazing LGBTIQ plus authors to come. The premise of this book is that we're following a man in London by the name of Dorian, who is the most beautiful man in all of the land, and there is an artist who is painting a portrait of him, and he keeps telling Dorian this, which gives Dorian a very big head. Dorian ends up loving the picture that this artist created for him, but while the artist is creating the picture, Dorian makes a wish to never grow old and ugly because he is told by the artist's companion that that is what happens when you grow up. Things happen from there. The original book is a short story, so I don't want to say too much more other than that, but it is a fantastic book. You want adult themes? This is the way to go. This is incredibly adult. There is no way this will pass for a middle grade or a YA. The first half is very nice. The second half is very, very, very dark. So be mindful of that as well. But here you are sitting there watching this video and thinking, Mr. Francy, you can't challenge me. I've read many classic books. Throw a challenge my way. All right. I will. Welcome to Tier 4. This is Advanced Classics. This is what we would otherwise entitle Struggle Town for Mr. Francy. So if you can take on these books, well done to you. My Tier 4 books that I'm going to talk to you about include 1984 by George Orwell, The Beauty and the Beast by Gabrielle Suzanne Bardot de Villeneuve, and Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. We're going to start with 1984. This book was the inspiration for the show Big Brother, because the basic premise of this book is that it is set in a time where, in 1984 anyway, where a Big Brother situation is actually going on. So originally this book was published as a dystopian because everyone is being watched with everything that they do. There are literally cameras everywhere. The writing style is incredibly tough to get through. There was no way I could have just read this as a physical book. I transitioned over to audiobooks very early on in this book. Also, the second half of this book is also what makes this a Tier 4. The first half is fine. It's world building. We're getting to know the situation. We're getting to understand what this whole Big Brother thing is. In the second half of the book, I'm going to give you one word: torture. And then I'm going to say torture to the highest degree. So please be mindful of that. Not only is this book a Tier 4 because of its writing style, it is definitely a Tier 4 because of its themes. The Beauty and the Beast by Gabrielle Bardot Suzanne de Villeneuve. Nope, said that wrong. Gabrielle Suzanne Bardot de Villeneuve. Okay. For those of you who want to correct me and say, but Mr. Francy, it's not called The Beauty and the Beast, it's called Beauty and the Beast, I would say, you're right if you're referring to the Disney film. The Disney film doesn't have the first the. The original canonical classic book that was written does. So Disney calls their film Beauty and the Beast. Gabrielle Suzanne Bardot de Villeneuve calls her book The Beauty and the Beast. Beauty and the Beast, the Disney adaptation, has the bones of this book, but it is very different in many ways also. Spoilers for the film, not for the book. So in the film, you know how we have the magic mirror and we have the rose, and that magic is tied to both of those objects? Nay, sir, not in this one. In fact, the only fantasy that occurs in this book is the curse that the beast is put under. The reason why this book is a tier 4 is not because of the subject matter, the plot, the story, not at all. This is purely based on the writing style. These, I, thou, and thou are brought up many times, written many times in this book. If you are not someone who is a lover of Shakespeare terminology, or if you are someone who back in the day struggled to read Shakespeare, please be mindful that these, I, thou, thou are in this book. I don't at all recommend starting here, and that is Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. I struggled so much with the writing style of this book, and the reason why I struggled so much, that the writing style in this book is from the Victorian era. And let me tell you, that is not an easy writing style to read. Some might argue, and well they might, that The Beauty and the Beast is harder to read than Treasure Island, and that's absolutely fine. They're both in the same tier anyway, as far as my tiers are concerned. But I just really struggled with this one. I wanted to just physically read the book, but once again, I found that I had to switch over to the audiobook. You may have heard a lot of booktubers, when they talk about classics, talking about the fact that they listen to it on audiobook rather than read the physical. And one of the biggest reasons that a lot of us will do that is because of the writing style. My argument is mainly the writing style itself. It is incredibly hard to read, and that is why I am saying that this is a tier 4. But in the meantime, that is where I am going to leave it. Letting you guys go. Peace, blessings, and so much love. Enjoy your classic reads, will you? Won't you? And I post videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I'll see you again soon. Mwah. Good night, and happy reading!